Ross Chastain used the wall to race his way into the championship four.
How's it going, y'all? My name is Eric. Welcome to Out of the Groove. We're talking all things Martinsville playoff race, the second to last race of the Cup Series season. The championship four field is set. We'll talk about that in a moment, but that last lap, I'm still shaking a little bit. I cannot believe he tried that. I can't believe it worked. I can't believe he got enough points. Ross Chastain is a maniac. That was a certified Lightning McQueen moment, if I've ever seen one. It's the kind of move that wouldn't work at most racetracks. And even in this case, if that move fails, if he doesn't gain any positions, if he just straight up crashes, if he doesn't get enough points to catch Hamlin, Chastain's gonna look like the biggest idiot in the world. You wrecked a perfectly good race car trying that on the last lap and it didn't even pay off. The stones on Ross Chastain to try that move, to somehow pull it off, you gotta respect it. I have never seen anything like that in my life. And there are people I'm seeing on social media who've been watching racing a lot closer and a lot longer than I have, who've also never seen something like that. Ross Chastain didn't win this race. I don't think he led a single lap today, but he stole the show. He is what everyone will be talking about after this weekend. And I guess he deserves it. I mean, wow. I'll genuinely be curious to see if NASCAR takes any sort of action going into next year. Like if they add some line to the rulebook that says, hey, no wall riding, even on the final lap. I don't know if that's something that'd be easy to judge, easy to officiate. I'm not even sure if that was bad for racing. I mean, I don't think it takes a whole lot of skill to do what Ross Chastain just did. Kyle Larson after the race called what Ross Chastain did embarrassing. And that's coming from a guy who tried a similar move at the end of last year's Darlington race trying to beat Denny Hamlin. Wow, Denny Hamlin, I guess 1 for 2 now defending wall ride moves. It's fun in the here and now. Going forward, I don't think we want to see wall riding on the final lap of short track races become the norm. Not in NASCAR, not at your local short track level or series. Does NASCAR need to implement some sort of rule before next year? Maybe. I feel like I need to wait for the dust to settle. Right now, like I said, I'm shaking. I'm barely able to get words across. I feel like I need to wait for the emotions, the adrenaline, everything to kind of simmer out, to settle down before we really step back and talk about if that's the kind of move NASCAR needs more of. Because while it's fun and new and creative right now, my gut is telling me that if that becomes the norm, it's gonna get old really, really fast. So we'll see. I don't know. I'm having a hard time getting words out. I don't have much else to say about Ross Chastain's move. I mean, I guess the only car Chastain damaged was his own. He didn't wreck somebody else for the win like we saw yesterday. But I don't know. Kyle Larson after the race said that's not a good look for our sport at all. If it just happens this once, I'm not sure I agree with Larson, but if it does become the norm, it becomes an actual strategy going forward, then I think I'll agree with Kyle Larson. But I'm gonna wait for the emotions to settle down before we really have that difficult discussion. As for right now, wow. Ross Chastain, showstopper. What a move, what a finish. Like I said, Lightning McQueen-esque. Whew, all right. Now let's talk about the winner, because even if Ross Chastain's move never happens, we still have a crazy storyline to discuss with Christopher Bell hitting his second walk-off of these playoffs. Statistically speaking, Bell has been the best and most consistent Toyota driver all season long. He's run into trouble here and there in these playoffs. Last round, he was in a must-win scenario at the Roval, took advantage of some late race restarts to rally and get the win there, lock himself into this round. And then in this round, he was unfortunately caught up in the Bubba Wallace Kyle Larson incident at Las Vegas, ruined what otherwise likely would have been a top 5 day there. He ran all right at Homestead Miami last weekend, but was not able to eat into his points deficit. He entered today virtually in a must-win scenario. Qualified 20th yesterday. I was ready to write off Christopher Bell's playoffs, and then he started moving forward. In that first stage, he was one of the first cars who seemed to be able to pass people. By the halfway point of this race, Christopher Bell had worked his way into the top 5. It looked like either he or his Joe Gibbs Racing teammate Denny Hamlin had the best cars on track. In stage 3, Hamlin's team had a couple bad pit stops in a row, losing him spots. Christopher Bell's team was able to execute, get him the lead, and he never relinquished it under green flag conditions. It took a caution with 34 laps to go and bold pit strategy from his competitors to put Christopher Bell back in traffic. But with those 4 fresh tires, Bell was able to drive from 6th to 1st in the final 24 laps to get the victory. Going away, second time in these playoffs, Christopher Bell entered a cutoff race below the cut line and was able to win his way into the next round. So congratulations to young Christopher Bell going to the championship 4 at Phoenix in just his 3rd full-time NASCAR Cup Series season, his 2nd year with Joe Gibbs Racing. A lot to be proud of. Of course, he's working with veteran crew chief Adam Stevens, who's won a couple of these championships with Kyle Busch as his driver. A lot of experience over there. The pit crew was on it today, but Christopher Bell got the job done. He's come through in the clutch twice in these playoffs. He has 3 wins on the season. I'm happy for him. I'm happy to see the DeWalt number 20 back in victory lane. That's really cool. But as I mentioned, Bell has been, statistically speaking, the most consistent JGR driver all season long. I'm happy to see that consistency rewarded. And we all felt bad for him at Las Vegas when he got caught up in the Bubba Wallace-Kyle Larson deal. If not for that, he likely would have been in contention to point his way into Phoenix. No matter how he got there, I'm glad he will be there. I think Christopher Bell deserves to be in this championship race. I think he's been one of the top 4 or 5 guys most of this year. I'm glad he's going to have a shot to go for the big trophy next week. I want to talk about that last restart because Christopher Bell took 4 tires, but Chase Briscoe and his teammate Cole Custer stayed out. William Byron, also needing a win, and a couple others took 2 tires, so Bell had some traffic to work through. For a moment or two, I thought Chase Briscoe was actually going to win this race. Yeah, I know. Last week on this show, I said there is 0 chance Chase Briscoe wins Martinsville. You can take it to the bank. He almost made me eat those words in the closing laps. With how difficult it was to pass, not nearly as difficult as it was here in the spring, but still very difficult, I thought with his teammate playing defense, Chase Briscoe had this thing on lock. Bell was having a hard time getting by Larson, getting by Byron, getting by Keselowski. 15 to go, 10 to go, even 8 laps to go. It did not look likely that Christopher Bell was going to be able to rally and catch him, but he was. And he got some help from Keselowski missing a corner, which allowed Bell to kind of squeeze past him on the outside, made that pass for second a little easier, saved some time. But once Bell got to Chase Briscoe, he did give him a decent bump, but he was clearly the faster car, got by him easily and drove off and hit. A valiant effort, though, by Chase Briscoe. They had a great car this weekend. They qualified 3rd, ran up in the top 5, top 10 for much of this race. A penalty in stage 2, I believe, put them behind the 8 ball. The gas can would not disengage once the car left pit road, got dragged out of the box, a justified, deserving penalty, lost all of his track position, went a lap down, got the free pass eventually, drove up to 9th, I believe, when they chose to stay out. So they rallied, almost pulled off the biggest upset of the season, and almost exposed one of my most confident takes of the past week. There is a lot going on. We've talked about Ross Chastain's video game Lightning McQueen-esque move. Denny Hamlin was on the receiving end of it. Denny Hamlin did everything right today. He entered this race 5 points below the cut line, qualified 11th, not too great, but managed to drive his way cleanly to the front in the first stage, won stage 1, then dominated stage 2, won by like over 7 seconds, looked to be in control of this race until his pit crew, like I mentioned, had back-to-back pit stops under caution that cost him 3 spots, then 2 spots, and then during that final cycle, with about 30 laps to go, they had another issue getting the left front off, cost him even more spots. He had to restart 12th there with 24 laps to go, behind Ross Chastain, the driver who at that point he was battling for the final playoff spot. But Denny Hamlin just kept putting the team on his back. He was able to pass Ross Chastain, who was abusing Hamlin's rear bumper. Then Hamlin went up and passed a few more cars, had a 2-point lead over Chastain when they took the white flag. If not for Ross Chastain's absurd move in the final 2 corners, Denny Hamlin's going to the championship 4, and it was all him. I had a lot of respect for Hamlin during his post-race interview. He kind of just told it like it is. I don't think he threw his team under the bus unfairly. He didn't take any, cruel shots at Chastain. I think he even called Chastain's move brilliant. Kind of laughed it off like, oh, what are you gonna do? Denny Hamlin has been to 3 straight championship 4s, and he did everything right today to make it to his 4th straight. It just didn't work out. NASCAR is a team sport, and unfortunately his let him down today, especially in the second half of this race. There is still so much to talk about. Let's go and look at the top finishers real quick, just run down the list, some notables. Second top 5 in a row for Brad Keselowski. He got dumped by Chastain earlier in this race, just got sent into the fence. I thought his race may be over. Nope, he rallied to finish 5th, played some strategy at the end there, but made it work. Congrats. Chase Elliott ends up 11th, no top 10s in this round, yet he is moving on to the championship 4, as we'll see in a moment, because he was the regular season champ. He collected more points than anyone the first 26 races. He's won more races than anyone else. That is still worth something. You can be great in the regular season and so-so in the playoffs and move on, or you can be so-so in the regular season, just sneak your way in and be great in the playoffs and move on as well. There are 2 different ways to make it into the championship 4. Chase Elliott's going with the former. That's not to say he wasn't good today. Chase Elliott finished 2nd in stage 1, 2nd in stage 2. He was really, really fast. Late race restart, some strategy shenanigans. He likely should have finished better than he did. I want to make that clear. Cole Custer ends up 15th. I mentioned him trying to play defense for Briscoe there at the end. I feel bad that he was put in a vulnerable spot like that because Cole Custer had a legit top 5 run going for most of the day. I do want to give Cole Custer some credit. We harp on him quite a bit for just underperforming, for not getting great results in an SHR car. Today was a great day until the final restart. 15th, A couple more I want to mention. Tyler Reddick ends up finishing last. He pulled his car into the garage midway through this race, citing health issues. He said over the radio that his head was hurting. Afterwards, the team said that he'd actually been dealing with lingering effects of that nasty Homestead crash from last week. So between that impact, Reddick talking about his head, the team did say he passed a neurological examination at the Infield Care Center today. So that is good news. But putting all these pieces together, another albeit perhaps minor head injury, allegedly, with another race car driver in the next gen. This one from a front impact. That is unfortunate. That is very concerning. I hope Tyler Reddick is okay. Not sure if he'll race next week. At this point, we have no reason to believe he won't, but if he chooses to sit out, it would be his last race with RCR. He's not really racing for anything anyways. I mean, I wouldn't blame him. One other notable storyline today was Kyle Busch. The 18 team quit today. At the end of stage 1, Kyle Busch was in last place 4 laps down. NASCAR Race Control actually came over the radio and told the team to pick up the pace because they were dangerously close to failing to meet minimum speed. That is humiliating if you're Kyle Busch and Joe Gibbs Racing. From what I heard myself and what I saw other reporters talking about, Kyle Busch wasn't even bothering to radio the team and talk about what was wrong with the car and try to make adjustments. Everyone just quit. The team quit. They clearly did not give Kyle Busch a good race car. He started mid-pack, fell back almost immediately. Car clearly wasn't good, but Kyle Busch quit as well. If Kyle Busch was actually racing for something, if he was coming back to this team next year, they were still battling for serious points, Kyle Busch would have put forth a valiant effort and he would have dragged, a killed race car at least into the top 20. Not 4 laps down getting passed by BJ McLeod. The whole team quit. I don't know why. Obviously, Kyle Busch isn't coming back next year. There's some bad blood, I think, at this point between Kyle Busch and Joe Gibbs, some hurt feelings at the very least. My conspiracy theory, if you will, is that this was in some way a statement, a protest almost against Ty Gibbs. Yesterday, of course, Ty Gibbs wrecked his teammate Brandon Jones for the win. Brandon Jones needed a win to make it into the championship 4. Gibbs was already locked in and he wrecked him anyways. Wrecked a teammate. Ty Gibbs was the #1 trend in the United States on Twitter for much of yesterday afternoon, and nearly the entire thread was drivers, fans, members of the media heaping massive criticism on him. When Kyle Busch strapped in today and felt that the car wasn't that good, rather than try to fight through it, try to scrounge together a top 20 finish, I think Kyle Busch decided to protest, said, hey, you want Ty Gibbs in this car next year? You saw what you're gonna get yesterday, you got him. That's just my conspiracy theory. We know Kyle Busch is an emotional guy. He's quit during races before, see Darlington in the past. But the team's also quit on him. It's safe to say that. The entire 18 team quit today. I'm not gonna blame them for it or anything, but that's the only way you can explain being in last place 4 laps down in stage 1. It's just sad to see how that relationship is ending these last few weeks, honestly. But those are some of your top finishers. Let's talk about the championship 4, the 4 who will be competing for the Drivers' Championship at Phoenix Raceway in 1 week. Joey Logano will be making his 5th Championship 4 appearance. Of course, he won at Las Vegas 2 weeks ago, so he's been able to spend an extra couple of weeks planning for Phoenix. Next is Christopher Bell, who also got a win in this round. This is Bell's first Championship 4 appearance. Like I said, just his 3rd full-time season in the Cup Series. 3-time winner, 2 of those wins have come in the playoffs just in the last few weeks. Is he peaking at the right time? I mentioned he has a championship caliber crew chief atop the pit box. Watch out for C. Bell. Then there's Chase Elliott, the 2020 Series champion, making his third straight Championship 4 appearance. He only has 2 top 10 finishes in these playoffs, but today easily could have finished in the top 5. Charlotte Roval likely should have won that race. He has 5 wins on the season, best of all drivers this season, so you cannot count Chase Elliott out. And lastly, grabbing that 4th spot thanks to that absurd move on the final lap is Ross Chastain, the Watermelon Man. This, of course, is Chastain's first Championship 4 appearance. I mean, you heard him during his post-race interview on NBC. 2 years ago, he was driving for Spire Motorsports. He was used to running multiple laps down, just happy to finish most of the laps on Sunday. 2 years later, he is in a Championship 4 race car. Has a legitimate shot at the title. I mean, we can talk about what this means for Ross Chastain, Trackhouse in just their 2nd year. Their rise has been meteoric the past 24 months. Happy for Ross Chastain. That move was crazy, but it worked. We'll go in depth and talk a lot more about all 4 of those championship contenders later this week. But for now, I think we've hit on most of the big storylines. I know there was a lot that happened in this race. I want to wrap up by putting this thing on the groovy gauge and talking about short track racing. Happy to see this race sell out. Martinsville Speedway announced a sellout earlier in the day, a complete sellout of infield passes, campsites, grandstand seats. That's awesome. And a little surprising considering how bad the race at Martinsville was this past April. The conditions in that Martinsville race were extreme. I was there. It was high 30s, low 40s, really cold. It was a night race, obviously. No rubber got put down. Nobody could really pass. It was not a good show. Today, the sun was out, at least a little bit. It was pretty overcast all day long, but the temperature was low 60s during most of the race, and Goodyear brought a completely different left and right side tire combination that clearly wore out. Lap times would drop more than a second over the course of a fuel run. We could visually see more rubber being put down in that sort of half to second lane. When drivers put on fresh tires, those first 40-50 laps, there was not much passing, aside from the initial restart, guys moving each other out of the way. But after a few laps, they'd get single file. Not a lot of passing for 40-50 laps, but once you got into the second half of a fuel run, we saw tons of movement, comers and goers, drivers fading, drivers moving forward. I mentioned Hamlin and Christopher Bell making a ton of passes late in stage 1. Much better product than what we saw here back in April. It's not to say that this package was perfect. The next gen car still has lots of work, lots of room to improve on short tracks. I'm not smart enough to know what that is. I think naturally having a wider tire like this and having less horsepower than they actually did at Martinsville last year, it makes these cars grip better. It's just harder to get them loose, to knock them out of the way. Anything you can do to take some grip away from these cars, I think would make the on-track product better. Of course, everyone was shifting multiple times a lap, every single lap, all day long. That, of course, plays a role. This was a better race, though, than the one in April. Easy. I think anyone who watched both would agree. This was a better race, more enjoyable, more action. Drivers had the ability to make moves on one another, stuff they could not do here in the spring. So I enjoyed it. I'm going to give this race a 70% on the groovy gauge. I probably would have scored it around a 60 before the final restart, but watching Bell work his way from 6th to 1st with fresh tires, Chastain and Hamlin trading blows back and forth, and Chastain's ridiculous move that we'll be talking about for decades to come, I think that's enough to bump this up to a 70%. Races at Martinsville are long, and I'd say most of stage 2 was uneventful, but stage 1 and at least the second half of stage 3 had plenty to keep me engaged. So a 70% for me, that's my score. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. I feel like I could talk about this race for hours, especially those last few laps, that whole final restart, all the strategy or setup that went into it. But I think I'm gonna leave things here. What did you think of Chastain's last lap move? Do you think NASCAR should implement some sort of rule saying you can't do that in the future? Do you agree with Larson, calling it an embarrassment? Leave your thoughts down in the comment section below. That's gonna do it. If you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any upcoming videos. Got a lot of stuff planned for Championship Week leading up to Phoenix. As always, a big thank you to my Patreon supporters as well. If I couldn't do the show without your tremendous support each and every month, I greatly appreciate it. We'll be back tomorrow. Might have to do a fully dedicated video to the Ty Gibbs saga I briefly addressed in this one. But that's gonna do it. Thank you all for watching. Have a great rest of your weekend. I will see you again very soon.